Let me walk you through something that still keeps me up at night. It starts with a car. A silver 2019 Honda Accord, parked on the shoulder of Route 47. Hazard lights blinking through freezing rain on a Tuesday morning in late January. Engine warm. Driver's door open. No one inside. That detail matters. The engine was warm. State Trooper Michelle Vasquez spotted it at 6:43 a.m. during her regular patrol. She ran the plates before she even got out of her cruiser. The vehicle belonged to a 34-year-old accountant named Garrett Hollis. No priors, no flags, no reason for concern. Vasquez approached the vehicle, expecting a medical emergency or maybe someone who'd pulled over and walked to find help. What she found instead was absence. Clean absence. No blood, no signs of struggle, no scattered belongings. The car was almost too orderly. Keys still in the ignition. Phone charging cable plugged into the dash, but no phone attached. A half-empty coffee cup in the holder, still lukewarm. And on the passenger seat, a black leather journal, closed. Vasquez called it in. Within 90 minutes, the scene was crawling with county investigators. They photographed everything, bagged the journal, impounded the vehicle. Standard missing persons protocol. They assumed Garrett Hollis had stepped out of his car for some reason and met with foul play, or wandered off disoriented, or was picked up by someone else. But then they opened the journal. The last entry was dated January 19th, 3 days after Garrett's wife, Laura Hollis, reported him missing. 3 days after this car was supposedly abandoned. Listen to what it said. The handwriting matched samples from Garrett's office, his signature on credit card receipts, everything. It read, "Told Elle I was working late again. She believed me. Same pattern, same excuse. How long can I keep this up? Need to figure out the next step before she starts asking real questions." The investigators stared at that entry for a long time. If Garrett wrote this on the 19th, he was alive 3 days after his wife said he vanished. If he wrote it earlier and misdated it, why? And if someone else wrote it to stage a scene, they'd done an almost perfect job replicating his handwriting. Notice what doesn't fit. The car was found on the 17th. Laura reported him missing on the 16th. But this journal entry is dated the 19th and references lying to Laura about working late. An ongoing deception. That's where the case stops being simple. I'm a cold case researcher. I got pulled into this investigation 6 months after it went cold, when the lead detective, Raymond Chen, reached out through a mutual contact. He sent me the case file in a water-damaged cardboard box that smelled like basement mold and old coffee. Inside were interview transcripts, surveillance photos, phone records, and a photocopy of that journal entry. Chen included a handwritten note. "This one got away from us. Something's wrong with the timeline, but I can't see it. Maybe you can." I read the file 3 times before I started making calls. Let me tell you about Garrett Hollis. By all accounts, he was unremarkable. He worked for a mid-sized accounting firm downtown, handled small business audits, came home by 6 most nights. He and Laura had been married 11 years. No kids. They lived in a modest 2-story house with a shared driveway and neighbors close enough to hear arguments through the walls. Laura described him as predictable, boring even. She claimed he never varied his routine, never stayed out late, never gave her reason to worry. Until January 16th, when he didn't come home from work. She called his office at 7 p.m. His supervisor, a man named Ken Drayton, stated Garrett had left at 5:15, same as always. Laura called Garrett's cell repeatedly, straight to voicemail. She waited until morning, then filed a missing persons report. That's the official story. But here's what the phone records showed. Garrett's cell pinged off a tower near Route 47 at 11:30 p.m. on the 15th, hours after he supposedly left work. It pinged again at 6 a.m. on the 16th from the same location, then went dead. No more activity. The phone was never recovered. So Garrett was near the location where his car was found, late at night, roughly 12 hours before Laura said he went missing. Why did Laura say he didn't come home from work on the 16th when the evidence suggests he was already out there the night before? I called Laura Hollis on a Thursday afternoon in July. She answered on the third ring, voice cautious. I identified myself, mentioned Detective Chen, explained I was reviewing the case. She went quiet for a moment, then agreed to meet me the next day at a diner off the highway. She arrived 15 minutes late, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. When she sat down across from me, I could see the exhaustion in her posture. She ordered black coffee and didn't touch it. I started with soft questions. How was she holding up? Whether she'd heard anything new. She answered in short, clipped sentences. Then I asked her about the timeline. Why did you report Garrett missing on the 16th when his phone records show he was already out on Route 47 the night before? She stared at me. Then she claimed she'd gotten the dates confused. The stress, the fear, everything blurred together. She insisted Garrett left for work on the 16th and never came home. I pressed gently, pointing out that his supervisor confirmed he left work on the 15th. Laura's hands tightened around the coffee mug. She corrected herself. He came home on the 15th. They had dinner. He seemed distracted. Then he announced he was going out for a drive to clear his head. She went to bed. When she woke up the next morning, he was gone. This version matched the phone records, but it didn't match her original statement to police, and she offered no explanation for why she'd changed the story. I asked her about the journal entry dated 3 days after the car was found. Her face went pale. She whispered she didn't know anything about that. It didn't make sense. Someone must have planted it. But who? I pressed. Who had access to Garrett's handwriting, his journal, his car after it was impounded? She didn't answer. She stood up, mumbled something about needing to go, and left cash on the table. I watched her walk out into the drizzle, shoulders hunched, moving fast. I sat there for 20 minutes, turning over what she'd said and what she'd avoided. Then I called Detective Chen. He picked up on the first ring, and I recounted the conversation. He listened without interrupting, then voiced a single observation. "She's lying, but I don't know what about." Neither did I. Not yet. I went back to the case file and focused on the journal. Garrett had kept it for years, documenting work stress, marital frustrations, mundane daily thoughts. The entries were sporadic, sometimes weeks apart. Most were boring. Complaints about clients, notes about needing to exercise more, occasional references to arguments with Laura. But 3 entries stood out, all written in the 2 months before he vanished. December 4th, Elle asked where I was Tuesday night. Told her client dinner. She didn't push it. Need to be more careful. December 21st, saw her car parked on Langley Street again. This is getting risky. Can't let Elle find out. January 7th, told Elle I was working late again. She believed me. Same pattern, same excuse. How long can I keep this up? The implication was clear. Garrett was hiding something from Laura. Meeting someone, going somewhere, maintaining a pattern of deception. The question was what, and whether Laura knew. I tracked down Ken Drayton, Garrett's supervisor. He agreed to meet me at the office after hours. Drayton was in his 50s, balding, wore wire-rimmed glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He seemed nervous from the moment I arrived, kept glancing at the door like someone might walk in. I asked him about Garrett's work habits. Drayton insisted Garrett was reliable, punctual, competent. No performance issues. But when I asked if Garrett ever worked late, Drayton hesitated. Then he admitted Garrett had requested overtime several times in December and early January. Claimed he was behind on an audit. Drayton approved it without question. I asked if Garrett actually stayed late. Drayton stammered, then confessed he didn't know. He wasn't in the office evenings. He assumed Garrett was working. I asked for access to building security logs. Drayton claimed he'd need approval from management, but he looked uneasy. I pressed. Did Garrett actually badge in during those overtime hours? Drayton adjusted his glasses. Then he revealed something new. A week after Garrett vanished, Drayton checked the logs himself out of curiosity. Garrett's badge wasn't used on any of the nights he claimed to be working late. Not once. So Garrett lied to his boss and his wife about working overtime, then went somewhere else. Somewhere he documented in vague, paranoid journal entries. Somewhere that involved a car on Langley Street and escalating risk. I needed to find Langley Street. It took one search to locate it. A residential street in a neighboring town, modest houses, quiet neighborhood. I drove there on a Saturday morning, parked at the corner, and walked the block slowly. Nothing jumped out. Families, retirees, a dog barking behind a fence. Then I saw the car. A dark blue Mazda, parked in the driveway of a small brick house near the end of the block. I cross-referenced the address with public records. The house belonged to a woman named Rebecca Simmons, age 31, employed as a dental hygienist. I ran her name through social media. Her profile was private, but her profile picture showed a woman with dark hair and a cautious smile. No obvious connection to Garrett. No mutual friends. No shared employers. Nothing. But Garrett had written about seeing her car here, which meant he knew where she lived, which meant this wasn't random. I knocked on Rebecca Simmons' door that afternoon. No answer. I tried again the next day. Still nothing. I left a business card in the mailbox with a handwritten note asking her to call me regarding Garrett Hollis. She called 3 hours later. Her voice was tight, guarded. She demanded to know who I was and why I was looking into Garrett. I explained carefully. I was investigating his disappearance. I had found references to Langley Street in his journal. I needed to understand the connection. Long silence. Then she asked me to meet her at a park downtown. Public place. Daylight. She specified she wouldn't talk long. When I arrived, she was already sitting on a bench near the playground, arms crossed, eyes scanning the area like she expected someone to appear. I sat down a respectful distance away and waited for her to speak first. She stated flatly that she and Garrett had been involved. An affair. It started in November at a work conference where her firm had provided dental screenings for his company's employees. They talked, exchanged numbers, started meeting in secret. Garrett told her his marriage was over, that he was planning to leave Laura, that he just needed time to figure out logistics. Rebecca's voice hardened as she recounted this. She claimed she believed him at first, but by late December, she realized he was stringing her along. He'd cancel plans last minute, go silent for days, make excuses. She confronted him in early January. He promised he'd tell Laura everything within a week. He never did. Rebecca admitted the last time she saw Garrett was January 14th. He came to her house unannounced, agitated. He claimed Laura was getting suspicious, asking questions. He needed to cool things off for a while. Rebecca told him if he walked out, they were done. He left anyway. 2 days later, she heard he was missing. She panicked. She didn't contact police because she was terrified of being dragged into the investigation, of her name appearing in headlines, of losing her job. She stayed silent, hoping it would blow over. But it didn't blow over. And now I was sitting across from her, asking questions she clearly didn't want to answer. I asked if she thought Laura knew about the affair. Rebecca exhaled slowly, then murmured that she didn't know for sure. But Garrett had seemed genuinely afraid of Laura finding out. Not just angry spouse afraid. Something deeper. Something that made him jumpy. I asked what she meant. Rebecca hesitated, then disclosed that Garrett once mentioned Laura had access to his emails, his phone, his bank accounts. He claimed she monitored everything. He'd started using a burner phone to contact Rebecca, deleting messages immediately. He was paranoid. That detail stuck with me. A husband hiding an affair isn't unusual. But Garrett's level of fear suggested he believed Laura was actively surveilling him. And if she was, she might have known about Rebecca long before Garrett vanished. I asked Rebecca if she'd kept any messages from Garrett. She shook her head. He made her delete everything in real time. No texts, no emails, no photos. Nothing that could be traced. Then she volunteered something new. The week before Garrett disappeared, he mentioned he was going to confront Laura. He was going to tell her about the affair, ask for a divorce, and move out. Rebecca claimed she told him to be careful. He laughed it off. 3 days later, his car was found on Route 47 with a journal entry that didn't make sense. I asked Rebecca if she thought Laura had something to do with Garrett's disappearance. She met my eyes for the first time and whispered that she didn't know, but she wouldn't be surprised. Then she stood up, stated she had nothing more to say, and walked away. I didn't follow. I sat there on that bench, watching fog roll across the frozen ground, trying to fit the pieces together. Garrett was having an affair. He planned to leave Laura. He was paranoid about her finding out. Then he vanished under circumstances that made no sense, leaving behind a journal entry that seemed designed to misdirect the investigation. And Laura had changed her story multiple times, avoided key questions, and acted like someone with something to hide. I needed to talk to Laura again. But this time, I needed leverage. I spent the next 2 days digging through financial records, phone logs, and surveillance footage. I requested toll records for Garrett's car. I pulled credit card statements. I mapped his movements in the weeks before he vanished. What I found was a pattern. Garrett's car passed through the same toll plaza every Tuesday and Thursday evening in December and early January. The toll plaza was located on the route between his office and Langley Street. He was visiting Rebecca on a schedule. But here's what didn't fit. On January 15th, the night before Laura reported him missing, Garrett's car didn't go toward Langley Street. It went in the opposite direction, toward Route 47. And according to toll records, a second vehicle passed through the same plaza 14 minutes later, a vehicle registered to Laura Hollis. Laura followed him. I sat in my car outside the diner where I'd first met Laura, staring at the toll records printout. The implications were obvious. Laura knew about the affair. She followed Garrett that night, and somehow his car ended up abandoned with a staged journal entry 3 days later. I called Detective Chen. I laid out everything I'd found. The affair, Rebecca's testimony, the toll records, the timeline contradictions. Chen listened in silence, then declared we needed to bring Laura in for a formal interview, not as a witness, as a person of interest. The interview happened on a Tuesday morning in August. I sat in the observation room with Chen, watching through one-way glass as Laura was led into the interrogation room by a uniformed officer. She looked smaller than I remembered, fragile almost, but her eyes were sharp, alert. The interviewing officer, a woman named Detective Sarah Ortiz, started gently. Routine questions. Background. Timeline confirmation. Laura answered mechanically, her story unchanged from previous statements. Then, Ortiz produced the toll records. She slid them across the table and asked Laura to explain why her car followed Garrett's through the plaza on January 15th. Laura stared at the records for a long time. Then she admitted she followed him that night. She claimed she'd been suspicious for weeks. She knew he was lying about working late. She wanted proof. Ortiz pressed. "What happened after you followed him?" Laura's hands trembled slightly. She stated she followed him to Route 47. He pulled over on the shoulder. She pulled over behind him. They argued in the freezing rain. He confessed to the affair. He told her he was leaving. She begged him not to. He got back in his car and drove away. She sat there, crying for 20 minutes, then drove home. Ortiz leaned forward. "Then why did you report him missing the next day if you'd just seen him alive?" Laura's voice cracked. She insisted she didn't know where he went after he drove away. She was terrified. She thought he might hurt himself. She called and texted repeatedly. No response. By morning, she panicked and filed a report. It was a plausible story. Almost. But it didn't explain the journal entry dated 3 days later. And it didn't explain why Laura initially lied about the timeline. Ortiz produced a photocopy of the journal entry. She asked Laura if she recognized the handwriting. Laura nodded. It was Garrett's. Ortiz asked if Laura had any idea who could have written an entry in Garrett's journal 3 days after his disappearance. Laura stared at the page. Then she whispered something that changed the entire case. She claimed that wasn't Garrett's journal. It was hers. The room went silent. Chen leaned forward in the observation booth. I felt my pulse quicken. Ortiz repeated the question slowly. "You're saying this journal belonged to you, not Garrett?" Laura nodded. She explained that Garrett had found her journal months earlier. She'd been documenting her suspicions about his affair, writing down times he came home late, excuses he made, patterns she noticed. Garrett confronted her about it. They fought. He took the journal. She never saw it again until police showed her the photocopy after his disappearance. But the handwriting in the journal matched Garrett's. Ortiz countered. Forensic analysis confirmed it. Laura's expression hardened. She stated Garrett had rewritten entries in his own handwriting. He'd copied passages from her journal, changing pronouns and details to make it look like he was the one being deceived. He wanted insurance, she claimed. Evidence to use against her if she ever accused him of cheating. Ortiz pushed back. That doesn't explain the entry dated after his disappearance. Laura met her eyes. Then she revealed the truth. She wrote that entry in Garrett's handwriting. After he vanished, the room felt like all the air had been sucked out. Ortiz demanded an explanation. Laura's voice was flat, emotionless. She claimed that after Garrett disappeared, she panicked. She knew police would investigate. She knew they'd find evidence of the affair. She needed to create a narrative where Garrett was the one lying, the one with secrets. So she took the journal he'd stolen from her, practiced his handwriting, and added one final entry. She dated it after his disappearance to make it look like he'd been alive longer than he was. She left it in his car before police impounded it. Why? Ortiz demanded. Why go to such lengths? Laura's hands clenched into fists. Because I thought he'd run off with that woman. I thought he'd abandoned me and I'd look like a fool. I wanted evidence that he was a liar, that he'd deceived me. I didn't know he was actually missing. I didn't know something had happened to him. Ortiz leaned back. "So you're admitting to tampering with evidence in a missing persons investigation?" Laura nodded slowly. She acknowledged she'd made a terrible mistake. But she swore she had nothing to do with Garrett's disappearance. She didn't know where he was. She just wanted to protect herself. The interview continued for another hour. Laura stuck to her story. She followed Garrett. They argued. He left. She went home. The next morning, she panicked and filed a report. Then she tampered with evidence out of fear and spite. It was almost believable. But Chen wasn't buying it. Neither was I. Because there was one detail Laura couldn't explain. If Garrett drove away alive on the 15th, who turned off his phone on the 16th? And why was his car still on Route 47 the next morning with the engine warm? We walked out of the interview room and Chen stated what we were both thinking. She's lying about something. We just don't know what yet. I spent the next week digging deeper. I reviewed traffic camera footage from Route 47. I interviewed gas station attendants. I tracked down every vehicle that passed through that area between midnight and 6 a.m. on January 16th. And I found something. A truck stop 3 miles from where Garrett's car was found had security cameras covering the parking lot and fuel pumps. I obtained the footage and watched hours of grainy video. At 2:37 a.m. on January 16th, a silver Honda Accord pulled into the lot. A man matching Garrett's description got out, went inside, bought coffee and a pre-packaged sandwich. He looked tired but not distressed. He got back in the car and drove away. He was alive at 2:37 a.m., 8 hours before Laura reported him missing. But here's what made my skin crawl. 4 minutes after Garrett left, a second vehicle pulled into the lot. A dark SUV. The driver got out briefly, scanned the parking lot, then got back in and drove in the same direction Garrett had gone. I couldn't make out the license plate. The angle was wrong, the resolution too low. But the vehicle matched the description of an SUV registered to Laura's brother, Marcus Hollis. I ran a background check on Marcus. He was 38, worked in construction, had a history of minor assault charges and restraining orders filed by ex-girlfriends. He and Laura were close. Phone records showed they'd spoken 6 times in the 2 days before Garrett vanished. I brought this to Chen. He authorized surveillance on Marcus. Within 48 hours, we had enough to bring him in. Marcus Hollis was a large man, over 6 feet, heavily built, with calloused hands and a permanent scowl. He sat in the interrogation room with his arms crossed, radiating hostility. Detective Ortiz started with soft questions. Marcus answered in grunts and one-word responses. Then Ortiz brought up the truck stop footage. Marcus stiffened. He demanded to know why police were wasting time on him when they should be looking for Garrett. Ortiz calmly explained that Marcus's vehicle had been captured on camera following Garrett hours before his disappearance. Marcus claimed it was a coincidence. He'd been driving home from a job site. He stopped for gas. He didn't see Garrett. Ortiz produced phone records showing calls between Marcus and Laura in the days before Garrett vanished. She asked what they'd discussed. Marcus's jaw tightened, Family stuff, he muttered. None of your business. Ortiz leaned forward. Did Laura ask you to follow her husband? Marcus went silent. His eyes flicked to the one-way glass, then back to Ortiz. He insisted he didn't follow anyone. But the footage showed otherwise, and Ortiz pressed harder. What happened after you followed Garrett from the truck stop? Marcus's facade cracked. He slammed his hand on the table and declared he didn't do anything. Laura asked him to keep an eye on Garrett, make sure he wasn't meeting someone. That's all. He followed the car for a few miles, then turned off. He went home. He didn't see what happened after that. Ortiz asked if Laura told him why she wanted Garrett followed. Marcus hesitated, then admitted Laura suspected Garrett was cheating. She wanted proof. She asked Marcus to tail him, take photos if he met someone. Marcus agreed because Laura was his sister and she was upset. So you followed him, Ortiz clarified. What did you see? Marcus exhaled slowly. He recounted that Garrett pulled over on Route 47 around 3 a.m. Just stopped on the shoulder, hazards on. Marcus drove past, pulled onto a side road, watched from a distance. Garrett sat in the car for maybe 10 minutes. Then he got out. Ortiz pressed. What did he do? Marcus's voice dropped. He walked to the edge of the road, stood there looking at the woods. Marcus thought he was going to pee or something, but Garrett just stood there. Then headlights appeared. Another car pulled up behind Garrett's. Someone got out. Who? Ortiz demanded. Marcus shook his head. Too dark. Too far. He couldn't see. The person talked to Garrett for a few minutes. Then they both got into Garrett's car. They sat there for maybe 5 minutes. Then the person got out, went back to their car, and drove away. Garrett got back in his car, started the engine, then just sat there. Ortiz asked what Marcus did next. He claimed he waited another 10 minutes. Garrett didn't move. Marcus assumed he was on a phone call or something. Marcus got tired and went home. That was it. He swore he didn't touch Garrett, didn't approach him, didn't do anything. Ortiz asked if Marcus told Laura what he saw. Marcus nodded. He called her the next morning. Told her Garrett met someone on Route 47, but he didn't know who. Laura thanked him and hung up. Ortiz produced a photo of Rebecca Simmons. She asked if this was the person Marcus saw. Marcus stared at the photo, then shook his head. He insisted it was too dark to tell. Could have been a woman. Could have been a man. He didn't know. But someone met Garrett on Route 47 in the middle of the night. Someone talked to him, sat in his car, then left. And hours later, Garrett's car was still there, abandoned. We needed to find out who that person was. I went back to Rebecca. I showed up at her workplace unannounced, waited in the lobby until her shift ended. She was furious when she saw me, accused me of harassing her. I apologized but insisted I needed one more answer. Did you meet Garrett on Route 47 on the night of January 16th? Rebecca's anger evaporated. She stared at me, then whispered no. She claimed she was home that night, alone. She didn't leave. She didn't see Garrett. I pressed. Did Garrett call you? Text you? Reach out in any way? Rebecca admitted he'd sent her a message around midnight, from a number she didn't recognize. The message stated, "Need to see you. One last time. Please." She didn't respond. She was done with him. She deleted the message and went to sleep. So Garrett reached out to Rebecca. She refused, and he ended up meeting someone else on Route 47. Someone who had access to another vehicle. Someone who knew where he'd be. I reviewed Laura's phone records again. She'd made 2 calls that night. One to Marcus at 11:53 p.m., lasting 4 minutes. One to an unlisted number at 1:16 a.m., lasting 9 minutes. I traced the unlisted number. It belonged to a prepaid cell, purchased with cash at a convenience store 3 weeks before Garrett vanished. The phone had only been used twice. Once to receive Laura's call on January 16th. Once to call Garrett's burner phone 20 minutes later. Chen and I stared at that record for a long time. Then he voiced what I was thinking. Laura called someone using a burner phone. That person then contacted Garrett. That person met him on Route 47. We needed to identify who owned that prepaid cell. I went back to the convenience store where it was purchased. The clerk, a teenager named Dylan, barely remembered the transaction. He pulled up the receipt. Cash sale. No ID required. He claimed hundreds of people bought prepaid phones there. He couldn't describe the buyer, but the store had security cameras. I requested footage from 3 weeks before Garrett's disappearance. It took 2 days to get approval, another day to review the recordings. And there she was, Laura Hollis, entering the store at 9:42 p.m., walking directly to the phone display, selecting a prepaid cell, paying cash, and leaving. No hesitation. No browsing. She knew exactly what she wanted. Chen authorized a second interview with Laura. This time, she brought a lawyer. The attorney was a sharp woman in her 40s, named Diane Krask. She sat beside Laura and stated firmly that her client would cooperate fully, but would not tolerate harassment or baseless accusations. Detective Ortiz placed the convenience store footage on the table. She asked Laura to explain why she purchased a prepaid phone 3 weeks before her husband disappeared. Laura glanced at her lawyer. Krask nodded. Laura claimed she bought the phone because she suspected Garrett was monitoring her calls and texts. She wanted a phone he couldn't trace. She used it to call a private investigator. Ortiz asked for the investigator's name and contact information. Laura provided it. A man named Vincent Carr, licensed PI operating out of a small office downtown. We verified it immediately. Carr confirmed Laura had hired him in late December to investigate Garrett's activities. He'd followed Garrett several times, documented his visits to Langley Street, identified Rebecca Simmons. He'd provided Laura with a full report on January 10th. So Laura knew about the affair. She had proof. She'd hired someone to gather evidence. But she'd lied about that during the first interview, claiming she only suspected. Ortiz pressed. If you had proof of the affair, why did you ask your brother to follow Garrett on January 15th? Laura's composure cracked slightly. She stated she wanted to see it herself. The investigator's report wasn't enough. She needed to witness it firsthand. So she asked Marcus to tail Garrett while she stayed home. She was too afraid to confront him directly. Ortiz leaned forward. But you called the prepaid phone at 1:16 a.m. on January 16th. Who did you call? Laura hesitated. Her lawyer whispered something. Laura took a breath, then disclosed she'd called Vincent Carr. She'd asked him to go to Route 47, talk to Garrett, convince him to come home. She was worried Garrett might do something reckless. Ortiz clarified. You hired a private investigator to intercept your husband in the middle of the night on a deserted highway? Laura nodded. She claimed she was desperate. Garrett had been erratic. She thought he might be meeting Rebecca. She wanted someone neutral to intervene. We brought in Vincent Carr that afternoon. Carr was in his mid-50s, former cop turned private investigator. He had a weathered face and tired eyes. He sat across from Ortiz and confirmed Laura's story. She'd called him after midnight, frantic, claiming Garrett was on Route 47 and she was afraid he'd hurt himself. She begged Carr to go talk to him. Carr admitted he thought it was strange, but Laura was paying well. He drove to Route 47, found Garrett's car on the shoulder, pulled up behind it. Garrett was sitting in the driver's seat, engine running. Carr approached the vehicle, knocked on the window. Garrett rolled it down. Carr identified himself, stated Laura had sent him. Garrett laughed bitterly. He asked if Laura was having him followed now. Carr didn't answer. He asked Garrett if he was okay, if he needed help. Garrett claimed he was fine, just needed space. Carr pressed gently, mentioned Laura was worried. Garrett's expression darkened. He stated Laura had no right to send someone after him. He told Carr to leave. Carr tried to continue the conversation, but Garrett cut him off. He insisted he was fine. He'd go home soon. Carr should leave. Carr asked if Garrett was planning to hurt himself. Garrett shook his head. He declared he was just thinking. He needed time alone. Carr offered to wait with him. Garrett refused. He told Carr to go. So Carr left. He called Laura, reported that Garrett was alive. Seemed upset, but not in immediate danger. Laura thanked him and hung up. Carr went home. Ortiz asked what time Carr left Route 47. Carr checked his phone log, 2:51 a.m. So Garrett was alive at 2:51 a.m., alone in his car on Route 47. Less than 4 hours later, State Trooper Vasquez found the car abandoned. Engine warm. Garrett gone. What happened in those 4 hours? Ortiz asked Carr if he saw anyone else in the area. Carr recalled there was another vehicle parked further up the road when he arrived. He didn't think much of it. Could have been someone sleeping in their car, another breakdown, anything. He didn't approach it. Ortiz pressed. Can you describe the vehicle? car thought for a moment, then offered that it was a dark sedan. Maybe a Toyota or Honda. He didn't get close enough to see plates or details. We pulled traffic camera footage from nearby intersections. Most cameras didn't cover Route 47 itself, but we found one at a junction 2 miles south. Between 2 and 6 a.m. on January 16th, 7 vehicles passed through, heading toward the area where Garrett's car was found. We identified 6 of them. Registered owners. Routine traffic. No connection to the case. The 7th vehicle had no front plate visible, and the rear plate was obscured by dirt. Dark sedan, consistent with car's description. It passed through at 3:22 a.m., heading toward Route 47. We never saw it leave. That vehicle stayed in the area. And when Trooper Vasquez arrived at 6:43 a.m., Garrett's car was abandoned, and the mystery sedan was gone. Chen and I worked the case for another month. We interviewed everyone connected to Garrett and Laura. Co-workers, neighbors, family members. We analyzed financial records, searched for life insurance policies, looked for motive. Laura stood to gain nothing from Garrett's disappearance. No major debts, no inheritance, no obvious benefit. But the pieces didn't fit. Laura had lied repeatedly. She'd hired an investigator, purchased a burner phone, sent car to intercept Garrett in the middle of the night. She'd tampered with evidence. And someone in a dark sedan had been in the area when Garrett vanished. Then we got a break. A hiker found a cell phone in the woods half a mile from where Garrett's car had been abandoned. The phone was damaged, screen cracked, battery dead. But it was Garrett's. Forensics recovered data from the phone. The last activity was at 4:17 a.m. on January 16th. A text message sent to the prepaid number Laura had called. The message read, "You were right. I can't do this anymore." That was it. No context, no explanation, just resignation. We analyzed the message. The phrasing suggested Garrett was responding to something someone had said. Someone who told him he couldn't go through with something. Someone who'd been right. Laura was the only person who'd communicated with Garrett through that prepaid number. But Laura claimed she'd only called Carr, never texted Garrett directly. We brought Laura in for a third interview. This time, Krask advised her to invoke her right to silence. Laura refused. She insisted she had nothing to hide. Ortiz confronted her with the text message. She asked Laura what Garrett meant by "you were right." Laura stared at the message for a long time. Then she admitted she'd texted Garrett after Carr left. She'd used the prepaid phone. She told Garrett he was making a mistake, that leaving her for Rebecca would destroy him, that he couldn't handle the guilt and consequences. She claimed she was trying to talk him out of it. Ortiz asked what Garrett replied. Laura stated that was his reply. "You were right. I can't do this anymore." And then what happened? Ortiz demanded. Laura's voice cracked. She whispered she didn't know. She texted him back, begging him to come home. He didn't respond. She called. No answer. She kept calling and texting for hours. Nothing. By morning, she panicked and reported him missing. Ortiz leaned back. "So you texted your husband at 4 a.m. He replied in a way that suggested emotional distress. And you didn't immediately go to him? Laura's hands trembled. She claimed she was afraid of what he might do if she showed up, afraid he'd run, afraid he'd hate her. She thought giving him space was the right choice. She thought he'd come home when he was ready. But he never came home. Ortiz pressed harder. Did you tell Garrett to hurt himself? Laura's face went pale. She stammered a denial. She insisted she'd only told him leaving was a mistake. She never suggested he harm himself. Never. But the text message suggested otherwise. You were right. I can't do this anymore. The phrasing echoed suicidal ideation, and Garrett had vanished hours later. Krask interjected. She stated firmly that there was no evidence of a crime. No body, no proof of foul play, no weapon, no witnesses. Garrett could have wandered into the woods disoriented. He could have been picked up by a passing vehicle. He could have chosen to disappear. The text message proved nothing. She was right. Without a body or concrete evidence, we had no case. Just suspicions, contradictions, and a timeline that didn't make sense. The investigation stalled. Months passed. Laura moved out of the house she'd shared with Garrett, relocated to another state. Marcus stopped returning calls. Rebecca changed her phone number. Vincent Carr retired. And I sat in my office staring at the case file, knowing something was wrong but unable to prove it. Then, 8 months after Garrett vanished, a dog walker found remains in the woods 3 miles from Route 47. Skeletal remains, partially scattered by animals, buried under leaves and debris. Forensics confirmed the identity through dental records. Garrett Hollis. The medical examiner determined cause of death: blunt force trauma to the skull. Manner of death: homicide. Garrett hadn't wandered off. He hadn't disappeared voluntarily. Someone had killed him and hidden his body in the woods. Chen called me the day the report came through. He stated simply that we'd been right. Laura had lied. And now, we had proof. We reopened the case as a homicide investigation. We re-interviewed everyone. We analyzed the timeline with new urgency. And we focused on one question. Who was driving the dark sedan that entered the area at 3:22 a.m. and never left? Traffic analysis showed the sedan had to have exited through back roads, avoiding cameras, which meant the driver knew the area well, which narrowed the suspect pool significantly. I reviewed maps of the area, identified every resident within a 5-mile radius, cross-referenced them with people connected to Garrett or Laura. One name appeared. Marcus Hollis owned property 2 miles from where Garrett's body was found. A small cabin he'd inherited from his father, used for hunting. We obtained a warrant to search the property. Inside the cabin we found nothing immediately incriminating. But in the detached garage, forensics discovered something. Trace evidence in the trunk of an old sedan Marcus kept on the property. Blood. Hair. Fibers matching Garrett's clothing. DNA confirmed it. Garrett had been in that trunk. and the sedan matched the description of the vehicle seen on traffic cameras. We arrested Marcus Hollis on suspicion of murder. In the interrogation room, Marcus sat silent for 2 hours. His lawyer advised him not to speak. But eventually, Marcus broke. He claimed he didn't mean to kill Garrett. It was an accident. He recounted that Laura had called him after Carr left Route 47. She was hysterical. She begged Marcus to go talk to Garrett, bring him home, do whatever it took. Marcus drove to Route 47 in his old sedan, parked up the road, approached Garrett's car. Garrett was still sitting in the driver's seat, staring at his phone. Marcus knocked on the window. Garrett recognized him, rolled down the window. Marcus stated Laura wanted him home. Garrett laughed bitterly. He told Marcus to tell Laura it was over. He was done. He was leaving. Marcus tried to reason with him. Garrett got angry. He declared Laura had sent everyone after him. She couldn't let him go. She was controlling and manipulative. Marcus defended his sister. Garrett insulted her. They argued. Voices raised. Then Garrett got out of the car. He shoved Marcus. Told him to get lost. Marcus shoved back. Garrett swung at him. They fought. Marcus was bigger, stronger. He grabbed Garrett, slammed him against the car. Garrett's head hit the roof pillar. Hard. Garrett collapsed. Marcus checked his pulse. Nothing. Garrett was dead. Marcus panicked. He didn't mean to kill him. It was self-defense. But he knew how it looked. He called Laura. She answered immediately. He told her what happened. She went silent for a long time. Then she told him to hide the body. Make it look like Garrett disappeared. She'd handle the rest. Marcus dragged Garrett's body to his sedan, put it in the trunk, drove to the woods near his cabin. He buried Garrett in a shallow grave, covered it with leaves and debris. Then he drove back to Route 47, wiped down Garrett's car, left the journal on the seat, and drove away. Laura orchestrated the rest. She filed the missing persons report. She tampered with the journal to muddy the timeline. She lied to investigators. She directed suspicion away from Marcus. She played the grieving wife while covering up her brother's crime. But why? Ortiz demanded. Why go to such lengths? Marcus's voice was hollow. Because Laura blamed Garrett for everything. The affair, the lies, the humiliation. She wanted him gone. And when Marcus called her that night, she saw an opportunity. She told Marcus she'd protect him if he protected her. They were family. They'd cover for each other. And they almost succeeded. We arrested Laura Hollis the next day. She was charged as an accessory after the fact, tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice. Marcus was charged with manslaughter. Both were convicted. Laura maintained her innocence throughout the trial. She claimed Marcus acted alone, that she'd only tried to protect her brother out of misguided loyalty. The jury didn't believe her. The evidence was overwhelming. The phone records, the burner phone, the staged journal entry, the coordinated lies. She was sentenced to 12 years. Marcus got 18. I attended the sentencing. I watched Laura stand before the judge, expressionless, as her fate was pronounced. She never looked at Marcus, never showed remorse, just cold, calculated acceptance. Afterward, I spoke with Detective Chen outside the courthouse. He remarked that some cases stay with you. This was one of them. Not because of the violence, but because of the deception, the layers of lies, the manipulated evidence, the deliberate misdirection. Garrett Hollis had been flawed. He'd lied, cheated, planned to abandon his wife. But he hadn't deserved to die on a freezing roadside because his wife orchestrated a confrontation she knew could turn violent. Laura had sent Marcus to Route 47 knowing Garrett was angry, knowing Marcus was protective, knowing the situation was volatile. Maybe she didn't plan for Garrett to die, but she'd created the conditions, and when it happened, she'd covered it up without hesitation. I think about that text message sometimes. You were right. I can't do this anymore. Garrett had been responding to Laura's manipulation, her psychological pressure, her attempts to break him down. In his final hours, he'd realized he was trapped, and Laura had known it. The case file sits in my archive now. Closed. Solved. But the questions linger. How much did Laura plan? How far was she willing to go? And if Marcus hadn't broken under interrogation, would they have gotten away with it? I don't have answers. Just the facts. A abandoned car. A staged journal. A body in the woods. And two people who thought they were clever enough to hide the truth. They weren't. The rain hasn't stopped since I started working this case. Every time I drive past Route 47, I see that silver sedan on the shoulder, door hanging open, hazard lights blinking through the downpour. I see Garrett Hollis sitting in the driver's seat, staring at his phone, unaware that his wife had set events in motion that would end his life. Some cases you solve. Some cases solve themselves. And some cases just reveal how far people will go to protect their own lives. This was all three. Rebecca Simmons left the state after the trial. She gave a brief statement to the press, expressing sorrow for Garrett's death, but maintaining she'd had no knowledge of Laura's actions. I believe her. She was a secondary character in someone else's tragedy. She moved on. Vincent Carr testified at trial. His testimony corroborated the timeline, confirmed Laura's midnight call, established that Garrett was alive when he left. Carr closed his practice 6 months later. Too many ghosts, he told me. The journal is sealed as evidence. I've read it dozens of times. The real entries, written by Garrett, reveal a man trapped between guilt and desire. The fake entry, written by Laura in Garrett's handwriting, reveals something darker. A willingness to rewrite reality to fit a narrative. That's what haunts me most. Not the violence, not the cover-up, but the calculated rewriting of truth. Laura didn't just hide her brother's crime. She actively constructed an alternate version of events designed to frame Garrett as unstable, secretive, possibly suicidal. She wanted investigators to believe he'd disappeared voluntarily, or harmed himself. She wanted his reputation destroyed even in death. It almost worked. I've been asked if I think Laura intended for Garrett to die that night. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe she only wanted Marcus to scare him, rough him up, send him home broken and compliant. Maybe she wanted Garrett hurt, but not dead. Or maybe, in some dark corner of her mind, she knew exactly what could happen when you send a violent man to confront a desperate one on a deserted highway at 4 in the morning. Intent is difficult to prove, but actions speak clearly. And Laura's actions after Garrett's death show someone who was prepared, methodical, and utterly without remorse. The house where Garrett and Laura lived is empty now. Foreclosed, sold at auction, occupied by a new family who knows nothing of what happened there. The arguments through thin walls. The surveillance. The slow disintegration of trust that ended with a body in the woods. I drove past it recently. Lights on, children's toys in the yard. A normalcy that feels obscene given what I know. But that's how it works. Tragedy happens, justice is served, and life continues. The location doesn't remember. Only the people involved carry the weight. And the people involved are scattered now. Marcus in a state prison upstate. Laura in a federal facility. Rebecca somewhere on the west coast. Carr enjoying retirement in Florida. The cast of a tragedy dispersed to separate corners, their intersection a brief, violent moment on Route 47 that cost a man his life. I still get calls sometimes, other investigators, true crime podcasters, journalists looking for the inside story. I tell them the facts. I don't speculate. I don't dramatize. I give them the timeline, the evidence, the outcome. What they do with it is their business. But I always end with the same observation. This wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a spontaneous act of violence. It was the result of choices. Laura chose to hire an investigator. She chose to buy a burner phone. She chose to send Carr to Route 47. She chose to call Marcus. She chose to tell him to hide the body. She chose to file a false report. She chose to tamper with evidence. Every step, a choice. Every choice, an escalation. Every escalation, another opportunity to stop. She never did. That's what makes this case different from others I've worked. Most killers act in the moment. Rage, fear, desperation. They make one terrible decision and spend the rest of their lives trying to escape it. Laura made a dozen deliberate decisions over hours and days, each one designed to conceal the truth and protect herself. She wasn't a grieving widow. She was an architect of deception. And she would have succeeded if not for a hiker's dog finding bones in the woods 8 months later. Chance. Luck. Fate. Whatever you want to call it. That's what breaks cases open sometimes. Not brilliant detective work or forensic breakthroughs. Just random chance. A dog walker taking an unfamiliar trail. A curious animal digging in the wrong spot. Bones emerging from leaves. Without that discovery, Garrett Hollis would still be a missing person. Laura would still be free. Marcus would still be hiding his crime. And I'd still be staring at a case file, knowing something was wrong, but unable to prove it. But the bones were found. The truth emerged. Justice, slow and imperfect, was served. I keep a photo from the case on my desk. Not of Garrett or Laura, not of the crime scene or the evidence. Just an image of Route 47 at dawn. Empty highway stretching into mist. The exact spot where Garrett's car was found. I look at it when I'm working other cases, other puzzles, other lies people tell to cover their sins. It reminds me that the truth is always there, buried, obscured, hidden under layers of deception. But there, waiting to be found, waiting for someone to care enough to dig through the lies and find it. That's my job. That's what I do. I find the truth. Even when people have done everything possible to hide it, even when the lies are careful and the cover-up is thorough, even when everyone involved would prefer the truth stay buried, I find it. I expose it. I make people answer for it. Garrett Hollis deserved that much. Whatever his flaws, whatever his mistakes, he deserved someone to care about what happened to him. Someone to refuse the easy narrative. Someone to notice the contradictions and press until they made sense. He got it. Slowly, painfully, but he got it. And Laura Hollis learned that you can't rewrite reality. You can fake a journal entry. You can lie to police. You can coordinate stories and hide evidence. But you can't change what happened. The truth exists independent of your narrative. And eventually, it finds its way to the surface. That's what this case taught me. The truth is patient. It waits. And when the moment comes, when the opportunity arises, it emerges. Undeniable. Inescapable. Final. Laura is appealing her conviction. Her new lawyer argues the evidence was circumstantial, that her actions could be explained by panic and misguided family loyalty rather than criminal intent. The appeal will probably fail. The evidence is too strong, the timeline too clear, the pattern of deception too obvious. But she'll try. Because that's what people like Laura do. They fight. They manipulate. They construct new narratives. They never accept responsibility. Never admit fault. Never acknowledge the harm they've caused. Marcus, interestingly, has stopped fighting. He accepted his sentence. He's been a model prisoner. He participates in programs, takes classes, follows rules. His lawyer says he's genuinely remorseful. Whether that's true or just good behavior for parole consideration, I can't say. But remorse doesn't bring Garrett back, doesn't undo the violence, doesn't erase the cover-up. It's just an emotion. Sometimes sincere, sometimes performed. Either way, it changes nothing. The facts remain. Garrett Hollis died on Route 47 in the early hours of January 16th. His wife orchestrated the cover-up. His brother-in-law hid his body. And for 8 months they maintained their lies while investigators searched for answers. They failed. The truth won. Justice, imperfect and delayed, was served. That's the end of the story. No dramatic revelations in the final hour, no last-minute confessions, no shocking twists, just the slow, grinding process of investigation. Interviews, records, evidence, analysis, persistence, and eventually, inevitably, the truth. That's real, true crime. Not the sensationalized version you see in movies. Not the conspiracy theories and wild speculation. Just patient, methodical work. Following leads. Checking facts. Refusing to accept easy answers. It's not exciting. It's exhausting. But it's necessary. Because people like Laura and Marcus count on investigations being lazy. They count on detectives accepting the obvious narrative and moving on. They count on the truth staying buried because no one cares enough to dig. They're usually right. Most cases don't get solved. Most lies go unchallenged. Most cover-ups succeed. But not this one. This time, someone cared. Someone dug. Someone refused to accept the lie. And Garrett Hollis got justice. 8 months late. But justice nonetheless. I closed the case file for the last time 3 weeks ago. Marked it solved. Filed it away. Moved on to the next puzzle. The next set of lies. The next person who thinks they're clever enough to hide the truth. They're not. They never are. The truth is always there. Always waiting. Always patient. And I'll find it. Just like I found it this time. Just like I'll find it next time. Because that's what I do. I find the truth. I expose the lies. I make people answer for what they've done. It's not glamorous work. It's not exciting. But it's important. Because truth matters. Justice matters. And the dead deserve someone to speak for them when they can no longer speak for themselves. Garrett Hollis couldn't speak. So I spoke for him. I found the truth. I exposed the lies. I made sure the people responsible faced consequences. That's all I can do. That's all any of us can do. Find the truth. Tell the truth. Make the truth matter. The rest is up to the justice system. Imperfect, flawed, but still better than nothing. Still capable of holding people accountable. Still capable of delivering consequences. Laura and Marcus will spend years in prison. When they're released, they'll be different people. Older. Changed. Marked by what they've done and what they've endured. But they'll be alive. They'll have futures. Opportunities. Second chances. Garrett won't. He's buried in a cemetery on the edge of town. Simple headstone. No dramatic epitaph. Just his name and dates. Born. Died. 34 years between. Not long enough. Not nearly long enough. But that's what he got. That's what Laura and Marcus took from him. Years. Decades. A future. everything. And for what? To protect a lie, to avoid embarrassment, to maintain control, to punish him for leaving. Pointless. All of it. Pointless violence, pointless cover-up, pointless destruction. And in the end, it didn't even work. The truth emerged anyway. The consequences came anyway. The punishment was delivered anyway. All they accomplished was making it worse. If Marcus had called police immediately, claimed self-defense, told the truth, he might have faced minimal charges. Manslaughter, probably. Maybe even acquitted if a jury believed it was accidental. But the cover-up changed everything. The lies, the hidden body, the staged evidence. It transformed an arguably accidental death into clear criminal conduct. It eliminated any sympathy. It guaranteed harsh sentences. They thought they were being smart. They were being stupid. And they paid for it. That's the other lesson from this case. The cover-up is often worse than the crime. If you make a mistake, admit it, face it, accept consequences. Don't compound tragedy with deception. Don't make it worse. But people don't think that way in the moment. They panic. They protect themselves. They lie. They hide. They hope it will go away. And by the time they realize their lies have made everything worse, it's too late. The damage is done. The trap is set, and there's no way out except through the truth they should have told in the first place. Laura and Marcus learned that lesson the hard way. In court, during sentencing, watching their lives collapse because they chose lies over truth. Watching consequences arrive that could have been avoided if they'd just been honest. Too late. Always too late. That's the tragedy. Not the initial crime, but the cascading choices afterward that make everything worse. I see it in every case I work. The original sin is often understandable, human, forgivable even. But the lies afterward, the cover-ups, the escalating deception, that's where people lose my sympathy. That's where understanding ends and judgment begins. Garrett made mistakes. He lied, he cheated, he hurt his wife. I'm not defending that. But he didn't deserve to die for it. And he certainly didn't deserve to have his death covered up, his body hidden, his reputation destroyed by people who claimed to love him. That's the real crime in this case. Not Marcus's violence in a moment of anger. But Laura's calculated, methodical destruction of truth in service of her own narrative. Her willingness to let her husband disappear without answers. Her comfort with lies. She's the villain of this story, not Marcus. He's a violent man who made a terrible choice and compounded it with weakness. But Laura is something different. Something colder. She engineered this tragedy. Maybe not the death itself, but everything around it. The surveillance, the pressure, the manipulation, the confrontation. She created the conditions. She set the stage. And when Marcus called her with blood on his hands, she didn't hesitate. She told him to hide it, to lie, to destroy evidence. To make her husband disappear, that takes a special kind of ruthlessness. a willingness to sacrifice truth for control, to value narrative over reality, to care more about how things look than what actually happened. I've met killers with more conscience, people who took lives in rage or desperation and spent years drowning in guilt. Laura showed none of that. Even at trial, even facing prison, she maintained her performance. The wronged wife, the devoted sister, the victim of circumstance. The jury saw through it. So did I. So did anyone who looked closely at the evidence. But I wonder how many people in her life never did. How many friends, co-workers, family members still believe her story, still think she was railroaded by an overzealous prosecution, still see her as the victim. Probably more than I'd like to think. Because Laura is good at lying, good at manipulation, good at playing the role people expect. That's how she maintained her marriage while surveilling her husband. That's how she covered up a murder. That's how she almost got away with it. If not for chance, a hiker, a dog, bones in the woods, she would have. She'd still be free, still lying, still playing the grieving widow while her husband's bones rotted in an unmarked grave. That thought keeps me awake sometimes. How close she came. How easily it could have gone the other way. How many cases end without resolution because chance doesn't intervene. Because the bones stay hidden. Because the truth stays buried. Too many. Far too many. I've worked dozens of cold cases where I know the truth but can't prove it, where the evidence is just shy of sufficient, where the witnesses are dead or missing, where the perpetrators have covered their tracks too well. This case could have been one of them. Should have been, statistically. But it wasn't. The bones were found. The truth emerged. Justice was served. I'm grateful for that. Not satisfied. Justice is never satisfying. But grateful that this one didn't get away. That Garrett got answers. That Laura and Marcus faced consequences. It's more than most victims get. More than most families receive. Not enough. Never enough. But something. Something is better than nothing. That's what I tell myself when the work gets heavy. When the files pile up and the answers don't come. When I'm staring at evidence that doesn't quite connect. Witnesses who won't talk. Suspects who know how to stay silent. Something is better than nothing. Keep digging. Keep pushing. Keep refusing to accept easy answers. Because eventually, if you're lucky, if you're persistent, if you care enough, the truth emerges. Just like it did this time. The rain is still falling outside my window. It hasn't stopped in days. Maybe weeks. I lose track. The sound becomes background. Constant presence. White noise that fills the silence while I work. I like it. The rain. It fits the work. Fits the cases. Fits the slow grinding process of uncovering truth that people have worked hard to hide. Drop by drop. hour by hour, question by question. The truth emerges, slowly, inevitably, like water finding cracks in a foundation. You can't stop it. You can delay it, divert it, hide from it. But eventually, the truth finds its way through. Eventually, the foundation cracks. Eventually, everything hidden is revealed. That's my job. Not to force the truth, just to be there when it emerges, to recognize it, to document it, to make sure it matters. Garrett Hollis is dead. Laura and Marcus are in prison. Rebecca has moved on. The case is closed. But the truth endures. In case files. In court transcripts. In my memory. In the empty house on the quiet street where a marriage ended in surveillance and lies. The truth endures. That's what matters. Not the specific people, not the specific tragedy, but the principle. The unwavering certainty that truth exists. That it can be found. That it's worth finding. That's why I do this work. Not for glory or recognition. Not for the satisfaction of solving puzzles. But because truth matters. Because the dead deserve someone to care. Because people like Laura and Marcus shouldn't be allowed to rewrite reality to suit their narratives. Someone has to stand against that. Someone has to insist that facts are facts, that evidence doesn't lie, that consequences should follow actions. That's the role I've chosen. That's the responsibility I carry. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. It's often thankless. But it's necessary. And someone has to do it. So I do. I've been thinking about Garrett's final hours, reconstructing them from evidence and testimony, trying to understand what he felt, what he knew, what he hoped for in those last moments. He left work on January 15th at 5:15 p.m. routine departure, drove home through rush hour traffic, arrived around 6. Laura was there, waiting. They had dinner together. She later claimed it was normal, ordinary, unremarkable. But Garrett's journal entries suggest otherwise. Tension, suspicion, the unspoken knowledge that their marriage was disintegrating. After dinner, Garrett announced he was going for a drive. Laura claimed this was unusual but not alarming. He'd done it before when stressed. But this time was different. This time he wasn't planning to come back. He drove toward Langley Street. Toward Rebecca. Maybe he was going to ask her to give him another chance. Maybe he just needed to see her one more time. Maybe he was rehearsing what he'd say to Laura when he came home and asked for a divorce. But Rebecca didn't respond to his message. She'd moved on. She was done. Garrett's lifeline was severed. So he drove. No destination now, just movement. Escape. He ended up on Route 47, a dark highway cutting through empty woods. He pulled over on the shoulder. Engine running. Hazard lights blinking. And he sat there, staring at his phone, trying to figure out what to do next. That's when Laura's surveillance kicked in, Marcus following him. Vincent Carr intercepted by Laura's phone call, the net tightening. Garrett trapped without knowing it. Carr arrived first. Knocked on the window. Garrett rolled it down, probably expecting police or a concerned citizen. Instead, it was a private investigator sent by his wife. The betrayal must have stung. Even in this moment, even out here alone, Laura was monitoring him, controlling him, refusing to let him go. Carr tried to talk to him. Garrett resisted. Eventually, Carr left, and Garrett sat there, alone again, processing the reality that his wife had sent someone to find him, even here, even now. Then Laura texted him, using the burner phone, the phone she'd bought specifically to communicate without Garrett knowing it was her. She told him he was making a mistake. Leaving would destroy him. He couldn't handle it. He wasn't strong enough. Psychological warfare. Manipulation. Undermining his confidence, his resolve, his belief in his own decisions. It's what she'd been doing for months, probably years. Garrett had documented it in his journal. The constant monitoring, the suspicion, the control. And Garrett, tired and defeated, replied, "You were right. I can't do this anymore." He wasn't agreeing with her assessment of him. He was admitting defeat, acknowledging that he was trapped, that Laura would never let him go, that leaving would require strength he didn't have. It's one of the saddest messages I've ever read in a case file. The resignation, the hopelessness, the recognition that escape was impossible. But Laura misunderstood, or pretended to. She testified that she thought Garrett meant he couldn't go through with leaving her, that he was coming home, that everything would be fine. But she also called Marcus, told him to go to Route 47, to talk to Garrett, to bring him home. And Marcus, protective of his sister and angry at Garrett for hurting her, went. What happened next is documented in Marcus's confession. The argument, the shove, the blow to the head, Garrett collapsing, Marcus checking for a pulse and finding none. I've tried to imagine Garrett's final moments, standing outside his car, facing his brother-in-law in the freezing darkness, realizing that even here, Laura's influence extended, that Marcus was there because Laura sent him, that there was no escape. Did he see the blow coming? Did he try to defend himself? Or was he too tired, too defeated, too broken by months of psychological abuse to fight back? The medical examiner couldn't say. Just blunt force trauma. Quick death, small mercy. But there's no mercy in what happened after. Marcus calling Laura. Laura making the decision to hide the body, to cover up the crime, to stage a disappearance, to destroy evidence and manipulate investigators. Garrett's body spent 8 months in a shallow grave, decomposing under leaves and debris, reduced to bones and fragments, while Laura played the grieving wife, while Marcus went on with his life. while investigators chased false leads and dead ends. 8 months. That's how long Laura maintained the lie. How long she let Garrett's remains rot in the woods while his family waited for answers. How long she prioritized her narrative over truth. I've interviewed family members of murder victims. They all say the same thing. The not knowing is worse than the knowing. The absence of answers creates a wound that never heals. They can't grieve, can't move on, can't find closure. They're trapped in limbo between hope and despair. Laura inflicted that on Garrett's family, his parents, his siblings, his friends. 8 months of uncertainty. 8 months of wondering. 8 months of hoping he was alive somewhere, maybe suffering amnesia, maybe choosing to stay away, but alive. The truth was worse. But at least it was truth. At least they could bury him. At least they could grieve properly. At least the limbo ended. That's another crime Laura committed. Not legally prosecutable, but morally inexcusable. The cruelty of letting people hope when hope was already dead. The selfishness of protecting herself at the expense of others' suffering. I met Garrett's mother once, after the trial. She thanked me for finding the truth. She was crying. She said not knowing had been destroying her. Every day she'd wondered if Garrett was out there somewhere, hurt or lost or needing help. Every day she'd hoped for a phone call. Every day she'd checked missing persons databases and unidentified remains reports. The truth was devastating, but it was also relief. Because at least she knew. At least she could stop hoping. At least she could mourn properly and begin healing. She asked me one question I still think about. Did Garrett suffer? I told her the medical examiner believed death was quick. I didn't tell her about the months of psychological torment leading up to it. The surveillance, the control, the trapped feeling documented in his journal. The defeat in his final text message. The knowledge that escape was impossible. She didn't need to know that. The physical death was quick. That was enough. But I know. And it haunts me. Because Garrett was being killed slowly long before Marcus struck that blow. He was being suffocated by his marriage, ground down by constant monitoring and manipulation. He'd sought escape through an affair, through plans to leave, through desperate midnight drives. But Laura had tracked it all, documented it all, used it all against him. And when he finally gathered the courage to leave, Laura ensured he couldn't. She sent the investigator. She sent her brother. She texted him psychological manipulation. She tightened the net until there was no way out except death. Did she plan that? Did she know Marcus would become violent? Did she deliberately create a situation where Garrett would die? I don't think so. I think she wanted him hurt, scared, broken enough to come home and submit to her control. I think she miscalculated Marcus's temper and Garrett's resistance. I think Garrett's death was an unintended consequence of deliberate cruelty. But unintended doesn't mean Laura isn't responsible. She created the situation. She sent Marcus there knowing both men were emotional, angry, volatile. She lit the fuse even if she didn't plan the explosion. And then, when the explosion happened, she didn't hesitate. She covered it up. She hid the body. She lied to everyone. She let Garrett's family suffer while protecting herself and Marcus. That's where intent becomes clear. Maybe she didn't intend for Garrett to die. But she absolutely intended to cover it up. She absolutely chose to protect herself over giving Garrett's family answers. She absolutely prioritized her narrative over truth. That's what makes her guilty. Not of murder, but of something equally corrosive. The deliberate destruction of truth. The weaponization of lies. The comfort with deception. I've worked cases involving killers who showed more integrity. People who killed in passion or desperation and then immediately confessed, overcome by guilt and horror at what they'd done. Those killers at least acknowledged reality, at least accepted responsibility, at least valued truth enough to admit what they'd done. Laura valued nothing but control. Control of her husband while he was alive. Control of the narrative after he was dead. Control of investigators, of public perception, of her own story. And she very nearly succeeded. That's what makes this case significant. Not the violence itself. Domestic violence, unfortunately, is common. But the sophisticated cover-up, the staged evidence, the coordinated lies, the psychological manipulation, the near success of it all. If the bones hadn't been found, Laura would have gotten away with it. Garrett would still be a missing person. Marcus would be free. Laura would be playing the abandoned wife, probably dating again, moving on with her life. The case would be in my cold file cabinet, unsolved, haunting. One of the ones that got away. But chance intervened. A dog walker taking an unfamiliar trail. A curious animal digging in the wrong place. Bones emerging into sunlight after 8 months of darkness. And the truth emerged with them. Undeniable. Prosecutable. Final. I don't believe in divine intervention or cosmic justice. But I'm grateful for chance when it works in favor of truth. When the random elements align to expose lies and deliver consequences. It doesn't happen often. Most of the time, chance works the other way. Evidence gets destroyed. Witnesses disappear. Memories fade. Cases go cold. Truth stays buried. But not this time. This time, luck favored justice. And I'm grateful for that. The rain outside has intensified. Thunder rolling in from the distance. Storm approaching. I should close the window, but I don't. I like the sound. Like the feeling of nature overwhelming the silence. Like the reminder that some forces can't be controlled or manipulated. Laura tried to control everything. Her husband's movements, the investigation, the narrative, reality itself. She treated truth as something flexible, shapeable, subordinate to her needs. But truth isn't flexible. It's bedrock, immovable. It doesn't care about narratives or convenience or who wants it buried. It simply is. And eventually, it emerges. That's the lesson from this case. The truth can be delayed, obscured, hidden. But it can't be destroyed. It endures. And given enough time, enough attention, enough persistence, it comes to light. That's what I do. I give truth time. I give it attention. I persist when others give up. I refuse to accept the easy lie. I keep digging until I hit bedrock. And sometimes, like with this case, I find it. The truth. Ugly, painful, devastating, but true. And truth, however ugly, is better than comfortable lies. Because lies corrode everything they touch. They prevent healing, corrupt justice, enable further harm. Lies protect the guilty and abandon the innocent. Truth, at least, is clean. Final. It allows consequences, allows closure, allows the process of justice to function. That's why I do this work. Not because I enjoy exposing people's sins, not because I like confronting liars, but because truth matters. Because someone has to stand for it. Because the alternative, a world where lies win, where deception succeeds, where people like Laura rewrite reality without consequence, is intolerable. So I stand for truth. I fight for it. I work until I find it. And I make sure it matters. That's all I can do. That's all anyone can do. Stand for something that matters. Refuse to compromise it. Accept the exhaustion and frustration and occasional failure as the price of that stance. Worth it. Always worth it. Because the alternative is surrender. And I don't know how to do that. Garrett Hollis couldn't surrender. Even trapped in a toxic marriage, surveilled and controlled and psychologically abused, he kept trying to escape. The affair was an escape attempt. The plans to leave were an escape attempt. The midnight drive to Route 47 was an escape attempt. He never stopped fighting for freedom. Even when Laura deployed every weapon in her arsenal. Even when Marcus arrived to drag him back. Even in his final moments, he was fighting. That deserves respect. That deserves justice. That deserves someone to care enough to find the truth and make it matter. He got it. Late, imperfect, incomplete. But he got it. And Laura got consequences. Marcus got consequences. The truth emerged. Justice, slow and grinding, was served. That's the best outcome I could achieve. Not satisfaction, there's no satisfaction in cases like this, but resolution. Completion. The knowledge that truth won and lies failed. That's enough. It has to be enough. Because most cases don't even get that far. Most victims don't get justice. Most families don't get answers. Most perpetrators don't face consequences. But Garrett did. His family did. Laura and Marcus did. This case got resolved. The truth emerged. Justice happened. I'm grateful for that. And I'm moving on to the next case. the next puzzle. The next set of lies waiting to be exposed. Because that's the work. Not one case, not one victory, but the ongoing commitment to truth. The refusal to let lies stand unchallenged. The persistence that keeps digging even when answers seem impossible. One case at a time. One lie exposed at a time. One truth revealed at a time. It's slow work, grinding work. Often frustrating, occasionally heartbreaking, rarely satisfying. But it's important work. Necessary work. Work that matters. So I do it. I'll keep doing it. For as long as I'm able. For as long as there are cases like this one. For as long as there are people like Laura who think they can hide the truth. They can't. They never could. They just didn't know it yet. But they're learning. One case at a time. One exposure at a time. One consequence at a time. The truth is patient. It can wait. It will wait. And when the time comes, when the bones emerge or the witness breaks or the evidence surfaces, it will have its day. That's the promise I make to every victim whose case crosses my desk. I will find the truth. I will expose the lies. I will make sure what happened to you matters. I made that promise to Garrett Hollis. And I kept it. His bones were found. The truth emerged. His killers faced consequences. His family got answers. His story was told. That's all I can do. That's all anyone can do. Honor the dead by refusing to let their deaths be hidden. Honor the truth by refusing to let lies succeed. Honor justice by doing the slow, grinding work necessary to achieve it. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting. But it's real. And it matters. That's why I do this work. That's why I'll keep doing it. That's why I'm already opening the next case file, reading the next set of lies, planning the next investigation. Because someone has to. Because truth matters. Because the dead deserve better than to be forgotten. And because I don't know how to stop. Don't know how to walk away. Don't know how to surrender to the comfortable lie. So I won't. I'll keep fighting, keep digging, keep refusing to accept the easy answer. One case at a time. One truth at a time. One victory at a time. Until there are no more cases. No more lies. No more fights. But that day isn't coming. There will always be cases. Always be lies. Always be people who think they're smart enough to hide the truth. They're not. They never are. The truth is always there. Always waiting. Always patient. And I'll be there too, waiting. Patient, the next case file is thinner than Garrett's was. A missing teenager. Last seen leaving a party. Phone going dark. Parents frantic. Local police treating it as a runaway. But something feels wrong. The pattern doesn't fit. The details don't align. And I've learned to trust that feeling. That instinct that says, look closer, dig deeper, don't accept the easy explanation. So I won't. I'll start the same way I always do, reading every document, noting every inconsistency, mapping the timeline, looking for the gaps where truth hides. It's what I did with Garrett's case, what I'll do with this one, what I'll do with every case that crosses my desk until I can't do it anymore. Because someone has to. Because these cases matter. Because behind every file is a person who deserves truth, justice, answers. The teenager's name is Morgan Chen. 16 years old. Honor student. Volleyball player. No history of running away. No troubled behavior. No obvious reasons to disappear. But the initial report says runaway. Case given low priority. Minimal investigation. Parents told to wait, that most teenagers come home within 48 hours. It's been 6 weeks. Morgan hasn't come home. I flip through the file. School records. Social media prints. Interview transcripts with friends. Everything surface level. Everything accepting the runaway narrative without questioning it. But here's what catches my attention. Morgan's phone went dark at 11:47 p.m. on the night of the party. Not turned off gradually. Not battery dying. Just stopped. All activity ceased simultaneously. That's not how people turn off phones. That's how phones get destroyed. Or taken. Or disabled. And Morgan's last text message, sent at 11:43 p.m., reads, "This was a mistake. Coming home now." A teenager who realizes they've made a mistake and decides to come home doesn't typically run away 4 minutes later. They come home. Like they said they would. Unless something prevented them. Unless something happened in those 4 minutes. Unless someone stopped them. I make notes. Circle the timeline gap. Highlight the inconsistency between the last message and the runaway theory. Start building questions. Who was at the party? Who saw Morgan last? Who did Morgan talk to in those final minutes? Whose car was in the area? What route would Morgan have taken home? Basic questions. Foundation questions. The questions that should have been asked 6 weeks ago but apparently weren't. This is how cases go cold. Not because they're unsolvable, but because the initial investigation accepts easy answers. Because overworked detectives take the path of least resistance. Because missing teenagers get classified as runaways and filed away. But Morgan Chen sent a text saying they were coming home. That's not runaway behavior. That's someone who got in trouble and wanted out. What happened in the 4 minutes after that text? That's the question. That's where the truth is hiding. I pull up the party location. Suburban house, parents out of town, typical teenage gathering. 23 people confirmed in attendance. Local police interviewed 12 of them. Cursory interviews. Did you see Morgan leave? No? Okay, thank you. No follow-up. No pressure. No real investigation. Just checking boxes to say the work was done. I'm going to have to re-interview everyone. Push harder. Ask better questions. Find the witnesses who saw something but didn't realize it mattered. Find the gaps in stories. Find the inconsistencies. It's the same process as Garrett's case. The same patient. Grinding work. Reading between lines. Noticing what isn't said. Following threads that seem irrelevant until suddenly they're not. The file includes Morgan's social media activity in the days before the party. Nothing alarming on the surface. Typical teenager posts. School stress. Weekend plans. Inside jokes with friends. But I read it twice. 3 times. Looking for subtext. Looking for hints. Looking for the thing everyone else missed. And I find it. A comment thread from 4 days before Morgan disappeared. Morgan posted about being excited for the party. A username I don't recognize replied, "Can't wait to see you there." Morgan's response, "Wait, you're coming? I thought you were out of town." The username, "Plans changed. We should talk." Morgan didn't reply to that. The conversation ended there. But the username commented on 2 more of Morgan's posts over the next 3 days. Brief comments. "Looking good. See you soon." I traced the username. Profile is private. Minimal information visible. No mutual friends with Morgan listed publicly. But the account was created 7 months ago and has only ever interacted with Morgan's posts. Nothing else. No other activity. That's not normal social media behavior. That's targeted. That's someone creating an account specifically to contact Morgan. Someone who didn't want to use their real identity. Who creates a fake account to talk to a teenager. Someone with something to hide. Someone who knows their real identity would raise red flags. Someone predatory. I feel the familiar tightening in my chest. The recognition that this case just shifted from potential runaway to something much darker. Morgan didn't run away. Morgan was targeted. And whoever targeted them was at that party. Whoever targeted them was there in those final 4 minutes. I need to identify that username. Trace it back to a real person. Find out who was so interested in Morgan that they created a fake identity to establish contact. This is the work. This is where cases break open. When you find the detail everyone else missed. When you notice the pattern hidden in plain sight. When you refuse to accept the easy answer. Morgan Chen didn't run away. Morgan was taken. Or lured. Or met someone who had been grooming them for months through fake social media contact. And now I have to prove it. Have to trace that account. Have to identify the person behind it. Have to find out what happened in those 4 minutes. The same way I traced Laura's burner phone. The same way I connected Marcus to the sedan. The same way I built the case piece by piece until the truth emerged. It's always the same process. Different details, same structure. Find the inconsistency. Follow the thread. Refuse to stop until the truth emerges. I'm already making calls. Already requesting data. Already building the timeline. Already refusing to let this case stay cold. Because Morgan Chen deserves the same thing Garrett Hollis deserved. Someone who cares. Someone who won't stop. Someone who values truth more than convenience. That's my job. That's my purpose. That's why I'm here. And I'll find the truth. Just like I did before. Just like I'll do again. Because that's what I do. The rain continues outside. The storm shows no signs of stopping. And I sit at my desk, reading Morgan's file, planning my investigation, preparing to dig until I find answers. Because someone has to. Because truth matters. Because Morgan matters. And because I won't stop. Can't stop. Don't know how to stop. One case at a time. One truth at a time. One fight at a time. Until justice is served. Until families get answers. Until the dead and missing are honored by the refusal to let their stories be buried in lies and convenient narratives. That's the work. That's the promise. That's who I am. And I'll keep doing it. For Morgan. For Garrett. For every victim whose case crosses my desk. Because they deserve it. Because truth matters. Because someone has to stand against the lies. And that someone is me. The file is open. The investigation begins. The search for truth continues. Just like it always does. Just like it always will. One case at a time.